Welcome to this FEI Coach webinar on futsal. I'm Gareth Marr. I'm delighted to be joined by FEI Development Officer Paul Keogh, FEI Project Manager Derek O'Neill, and FEI Lead Futsal Tutor Martin Perciavelle. Paul, now I suppose just a sense of how you got involved in futsal, Paul.
Yeah, I suppose my background goes back to 2008, actually, when I just started in the association, and it was Derek O'Neill actually was putting on a presentation in the Baldoyle Sutton area for coaches and just trying to promote futsal its infancy. And I was a club coach in grassroots at the time. And where I was kind of taken by the game is when Derek introduced, the yellow fluffy ball that we all kind of grew up with in secondary schools. Take about 5 touches to control that particular ball, and often get stuck in the rafters in those secondary school halls. So we looked at that, the players trying to play and control that, and using the walls and the chaos and whatnot. Then obviously the futsal ball was introduced, and for me, that was just an eye opener. The ball on the ground, the touches. We were asked to keep an eye on a particular player. How many touches would that player receive within the couple of minutes, comparative to the couple of touches that they would receive with the bouncy yellow ball? So from that, I kind of went away, did my own bit of research. Obviously, I just started within the Football Association, and my interest kind of grew from there. Derek obviously brought me involved with the international team, so got to travel all over Europe to Barcelona, to Hungary. I got to see the scale of futsal live on TV, 4,000 people in these indoor arenas. Obviously, we're a young futsal team just starting off on the journey. But from that, I kind of took away, there's something in this game. This really does need to be explored further. And my particular interest has been and still is grassroots with the young players, and to try and devise a format, a module, whether it be in the winter, to ensure these kids have opportunities to play this fantastic game. Following on from that, myself and Derek travelled over to Spain, to Santiago de Compostela, did this with the Spanish FA, and that was in 2011. Then recently in 2019, we travelled again to the Spanish FA, a delegation from the association, and I spent 4 days with Jose Venancio Lopez, 4 times winner of the UEFA Futsal Championship, and the insight we got was just phenomenal, and we'll talk about that later with the viewers. So essentially, that's kind of where my passion grew, and as I said, I've been continuously trying to grow it in the Dublin area.
Great stuff. Martin, yourself?
Well, I started playing the game when I was really young. I started in Uruguay. Started playing something that we call baby football. And during the summer times, we used to travel to Argentina to play futsal and play against those big teams over there. So my passion started to grow there. Okay, slowly started to grow. I started to get involved with the game more often. I felt how good the game was for me personally, and my passion started to grow from there. Okay, then I moved to Ireland. I started to do my coaching licenses, all my football coaching licenses, and in 2008, I met Junior Silva, who was part of the coaching staff from the national team, and he invited me to be part of Sporting Fingal Futsal. Okay, and from there I started my career as a futsal coach here in Ireland, doing just going through different teams, and proudly being the national team of the deaf Irish team, and we had a chance to compete in 2 European qualifiers. I have my B license in football, and I also a high performance futsal training specialist since 2019.
Sorry, Derek, yourself as well?
Yeah, I retired from playing football in around the year 2000, 2001. And I started doing my coaching badges around that time. I wanted to get in and start doing a bit of coaching. And luckily enough, around the time, Stephen Kenny offered me an opportunity to come in as his first team coach with Longford Town. So that was a great experience for me. So I went in with Stephen, but I'd already been promoting futsal for a couple of years around that time as well. And I'd introduced the game to Brian Kerr, who was the technical director in the FAI at the moment. I made a presentation to Brian and the team of development officers. So as it happens, towards the end of that season, Stephen had the opportunity to move on to Bohemians. And I was offered the opportunity by Brian to come and join the FAI as a national coordinator. And part of that remit will be to promote and develop futsal. So that was an offer that was too good to kind of turn down for me. So I went and I joined Brian and the team of development officers there. So funny how things come full circle, and Stephen has followed me back to the FAI 19 years later. So I suppose where I initially came across futsal or discovered futsal was through a contact I had in England, a guy called Simon Clifford. Simon was a mad Middlesbrough fan, and it was around the time that Juninho, the Brazilian superstar, had joined Middlesbrough. So Simon became very, very friendly with Juninho's father and Juninho. And of course, Simon being the coach wanted to pick Juninho's brain as to, you know, how can Brazil continually produce a stream of world-class superstars year in, year out, world players of the year every few years. So Juninho was explaining that a big part of his development as he was growing up was futsal, and was amazed that futsal wasn't being used in the UK. So I suppose Simon was fairly kind of taken by that and went off on a research trip to Brazil and found indeed that futsal was massive there, and came back and started a chain of soccer schools using Brazilian coaching methods, and went on to do really well for himself there. However, I was kind of intrigued myself and decided to go off on my own voyage of discovery to Brazil, and I suppose with a case full of Factor 50 sun cream as well, which was badly needed. But I went off and I visited some of the top clubs over there: Flamengo Football Club, Santos Football Club, the Zico, Rivellino academies. It was an unbelievable experience to see what I could pick up as a young coach. I suppose the big thing that came home to me, the common denominator in every single school, every single club I went to, was futsal. It was really a light bulb moment for me. They were telling me that up to the age of 12, the kids are playing nothing else except futsal. And it's only from the age of 13 onwards that they start playing what they call football campo, outdoor football on the grass. So to me, I suppose, looking at the climate in Ireland, you know, how bad it is, that it should be a no-brainer that we should be playing futsal in Ireland. I suppose there's been kind of, you know, a whole line of Brazilian superstars that have come from futsal. And I suppose if anybody just wants to click into YouTube and put in the word of any Brazilian player and the word futsal beside it, you'll come back with a video of all those superstars playing futsal as kids. So as I said, it was a light bulb moment for me, and given the fact that, you know, Ireland's probably the wettest country in Europe, and throughout the winter time, kids' games were continually being called off. There was kids probably going the best part of 2 months without a game. I kind of said, this is crazy. I mean, futsal should be a no-brainer for Ireland. I suppose when you look at the environment that futsal is kind of played in compared to the environments that kids have been playing in here, the mucky wet pitches, I mean, I'm saying to myself, which game would the kids enjoy most? Where would they get the most developmental benefit? And which is less likely to be called off, you know? So I suppose the big thing about futsal, though, that kind of attracted me was the player development aspect of it. And I'm sure the lads will contribute to this little slide as well. I mean, from my own point of view, I looked at the environment. It's a far more enjoyable environment to be playing in. Rather than out mucky pitches, you're playing in a nice, comfortable indoor hall, perfect pitch, ball flying around. I suppose having more contact with the ball, being more involved in the game because it's five-a-side. You know, the tight space, the higher tempo of the game, the continuous transitions. You know, all that, you know, accelerates the development of technique. It stimulates creativity. And of course, that all-important game intelligence, where you're involved in critical game situations all the time. It's fantastic creating that game intelligence. And of course, those critical attacking and defending skills. You know, there's a misconception out there that futsal is all about developing tricky players, but it's a whole lot more than that. It's about developing the all-round player and the player's all-round game.
And just
Paul, Martin, would you agree?
Just on that there, yeah. Just on especially the weather, you know, when I was obviously involved with a prominent grassroots club, I just got so frustrated with game being called off after called off, coming into November, December to January, February. And I kept saying to myself, surely there's a solution. There has to be an alternative. And you could see the kids getting disappointed with the games being called off. And that, again, kind of grew my interest in this game of futsal. Well, why not? If the game is called off on grass, why can't we transfer it to indoors? You know, it's an obvious alternative. Yes, there's a challenge on halls and facilities, but, you know, with every secondary school having a hall with community centres nowadays, you know, there has been a lot of investment in facilities. So I saw firsthand, you know, with the young players that obviously we used to train outdoors and we brought them indoors. This was U10, U11 many years ago. And often that little player that can often get lost, that obviously we need to stick with, you know, but he can get detached in a 7v7, 9v9 and obviously 11v11 game. But in futsal, he comes into his own. He's closely connected to the players. He's closely connected to the ball. And you really see his skills shine. So that kind of further emphasised to me, this needs to be looked into further. And as Derek explained and how he brought the game on, and when he was, you know, in charge of futsal, that was a cornerstone of what we were trying to do.
A lot of it is down to embracing change here, isn't it? Because I suppose Derek, Paul, you know, we probably recognise that muddy pitch more so than maybe Martin recognises it, like, you know, from the Irish weather growing up and those kind of back muddy pitches, as you mentioned. But embracing change, that's how Brazil have done it, obviously. And you look at some other European nations as well, and that's how we're going to move forward, isn't it, by doing that?
Yeah, and for me, the most important thing is that if you play in those muddy pitches and you can't properly pass the ball, kids are going to be frustrated because they cannot pass the ball. So if you allow them to go to an environment where they feel confident, and this is a word that I like to use when I'm doing the futsal licenses, confidence. We are passing the ball 6 more times. We are shooting 6 more times. We are controlling the ball 6 more times than football. We are shielding the ball 6 more times than football. So at the end of and that's also include the goalkeeper. So the goalkeeper is stopping 6 more shots than in football. So imagine the confidence that a young player has when it is involved so many times in the game.
Yeah, and I think that leads perfectly on to a video clip we have here. When I was there, I got to see the Flamengo kids being developed and trained.
The session ends with a 4 versus 4 small-sided game.
And I was speaking to the technical director there, and he was only telling me a few years previously that Marcelo of Real Madrid had played on these exact pitches.
Players keep a shape, but it is not important who plays in any particular position.
So I suppose the thing that stood out to me for kids of 10, 11 years of age,
the coach constantly encourages the players to control the ball,
the confidence of the kids on the ball was amazing. I've coached a lot of 10-year-old kids over the last number of years, and the difference in these kids having had futsal under their belt for a number of years before that was absolutely amazing. I mean, as I said, the game intelligence of the kids was beyond kind of an average 10-year-old here in Ireland.
Derek, can I ask you a question? You obviously played to a very good level in your career. I know we always look back and kind of, you know, what could have been or something, but if you had futsal at an earlier age in your career, do you think you would have been a completely different player or certainly a different player?
I suppose from the point of view of developing as a player, I would say probably yes. But look, I played football on the streets for years. I play like 6-7 hours a day on the street, so that's where I developed my football skills. And I suppose we'll probably speak about it later on when we're talking about street football and players who develop through street football. I mean, I think what futsal is doing is replicating the environment that street football would have gave players like me when I was a kid. Street football is not so prevalent anymore. I'm originally from Kilbarrack. I lived in a cul-de-sac in Kilbarrack, and that was my Wembley Stadium. But if I go down and visit my mum now,
This end game is used to give the youngsters the opportunity to replicate the techniques and skills developed earlier in the
So as I said, it's not so prevalent. And what we're looking
Notice
to do
here how the players invariably control the ball using the sole of the foot.
That street football
Having received the ball and rolled it out to their feet,
but yeah, to go back to your
their
question,
head up to either run with the ball
as a player,
or make
I
another pass.
felt futsal would have done an awful lot for me. But then I'd probably say, well, would I have become a futsal player if we'd futsal here, or a footballer? I mean, I loved playing indoor football as a kid, even though it was with the furry bouncy ball. But something like futsal,
every time
where
they make
it was,
a pass,
more
they always run into another
the
position,
rules,
looking to receive
a new
the ball
pathway
again.
to go on and become an
And when
international
in full
player.
positions,
You know,
they're always
who
looking
knows?
for the
I could
opportunity
pick futsal
to
over
score
football.
goals.
There can be a marriage between the two, can't there, though? Like even in the image there, we see Dane Massey there, who's obviously gone on and had a great career with Dundalk.
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing that we really love to emphasise here today, that futsal, while it's a standalone game, in its own, after you get to a certain stage, it's a complementary player development tool. The reason that we want to promote futsal is to create better footballers, not to create better futsal players initially. So if we can get the youngest kids in the country from 6-7 years of age up to that critical age 13-14 playing a lot of futsal, you give them a fantastic grounding in the technical aspects of the game, in the elements, in the aspects of game intelligence. There's a misconception out there that futsal is all about developing tricky, skillful kind of players. And you mentioned Dane Massey there, and it's an example I always come back to. When we started with the national futsal team back in 2007, we chose those players from the League of Ireland futsal competition we were running at the time. And we identified Dane, who was a highly technical player at the time. He was playing winger as a 19-year-old for Shamrock Rovers. And we thought, fantastic ability. He's ideally suited to the futsal team. Let's bring him in. Now, Dane will probably admit to himself that at the time he still had a wee bit to learn about defending. So what futsal did for Dane was to teach him how to defend. Because we were a fledgling futsal team, a national team, and we were playing against professional players, we were constantly on the back foot. So we had to very, very quickly had to learn how to defend, both as an individual and in the collective team unit. I think Dane picked up a huge amount in terms of learning how to defend, in a high pressure environment when he was playing with the national futsal team. And he's gone on to become probably one of the greatest all-time left fulls in the League of Ireland, and he's got a pocket full of League of Ireland medals, and I'm absolutely delighted for him. But I'm sure he'll acknowledge that period in his career where he did do a bit of learning in relation to his defensive side of his game.
Yeah, it's an interesting point there, Martin, isn't it, in terms of Derek talking about the way the game's played there, in terms of learning the different sides of it, because you see a lot now when people talk about football, when they're breaking it down in analysis, they talk about transition and the importance of transition in football from defence to attack. Futsal's the best way of doing that, isn't it? Because you're constantly moving back and forth across the pitch.
Absolutely. I mean, you need 4 defenders, 4 players to attack and 4 players to defend. I mean, if you don't have the 4 players defending, then definitely you're going to have issues. And Derek mentioned a really good point about Massey. I mean, futsal. And once again, I just want to say this again: the confidence that futsal brings to the young players is going to be a massive change in the way that we develop our football players. Okay, more touches, more times that they have to defend, more 1v1s. All that stuff is going to help the player to develop itself. And again, for me, transitions in futsal plays a huge part. Huge part. Most of the goals coming from transitions. Okay, most of the goals are coming from transition. And normally, what happens is that when the ball is lost, 1 or 2 players are lost in the concentration, and then you have a 3v2 situation or a 4v2 situation. So if you don't learn how to defend those situations rapidly, you are going to be in trouble. Okay, you are going to be in trouble.
Paul, one of the points that Derek touched on there about the misconception of futsal, that it's all about technique, and that, like that quote there we see on the screen from Franco Baresi, one of the best defenders of all time, former Italy captain. That's a really pertinent point there about the game intelligence, isn't it? Actually, it reminds me, he said something similar about Paul McGrath after we beat Italy in 1994 in the World Cup. And that was a prime example of Paul McGrath using game intelligence, to help us get the 3 points that day.
Well, as we know, game intelligence, it's one of the hardest things to coach in football and futsal, and obviously providing the environment is crucial. And in this case, obviously, futsal provides that, as Martin mentioned, about the more scoring opportunities, more defensive opportunities. But you're 20 yards from the goal every moment in futsal. So even from a young player's point of view, and their actions they take, what do kids love to do? Well, what do even adults love to do? We love to score. We love to score. So you got more scoring opportunities. So when people ask what is futsal, well, it's a really fun version of the game, built in all these technical aspects, as you mentioned, Gareth, the game intelligence. You're just making so many more decisions. As I said, I was lucky enough to go and see the Spanish Futsal Cup and many years ago, and at a senior level, and the way these chaps were able to take the ball under severe pressure. I remember being taught when I was, being grown up, don't pass to somebody that's under a bit of pressure. Nonsense. These guys, give me the ball under pressure. I'll deal with it. I'll control it. I'll manipulate the ball out of tight spaces, as again, repetitive futsal actions in this instance that would have been brought up with. So, it's huge on that front, Gareth.
Yeah, and sorry, Gary, and one thing that I want to mention that, again, confidence. But for me, the most important thing is that, yes, in football, you also train small-sided game, but you are not competing in a small-sided game. And that's where the player grows the most. When you need to compete in a small-sided game, is completely different than training in a small-sided game. Okay, you don't have that pressure when you're training in a small-sided game than when you're actually playing, because if you lose the ball when you're playing a match, then the risk is higher. That's what futsal can bring you, confidence in those crucial moments.
Yeah, I think Paul mentioned game intelligence there as well. You can't coach game intelligence. You develop game intelligence by playing. And if you're playing in a game whereby you're getting 6 times more contact with the ball, that you're getting 6 times more involvement in critical game situations where you have to make decisions that you live or die by, that's where you develop game intelligence. And that's what futsal kind of brings to the table here.
And it's about development as well, Derek, isn't it? Because as you click onto Wes Houlihan, I was going to say that it's not like it has to be in your DNA that you have to have a Brazilian passport or something. Like we have had technical players like Wes was a great example, like during his career, and it just needs to be fostered.
It's absolutely. I mean, there's no massive secret. Brazilians don't have a God-given right to be world-class players. They do it through sheer hard work and sheer involvement in the game and the hours they actually put in on the pitch. And I suppose with futsal being a fantastic player development tool, can you imagine the amount of hours that they're putting in on the futsal pitch with 6 times more involvement than our players have on the outdoor pitch? I mean, it's not rocket science. It's the hours you actually put in, the hours of practice and how you practice, and futsal is a huge part of that. I mean, as I said, we mentioned Wes, and when we talk about technical players in Ireland, probably the 2 most creative players in recent years are probably Wes, and then we think about Jack Byrne, and it's no coincidence that they learned their skills on the streets of inner city Dublin, in the flats complexes and on the small kind of concrete pitches in there, which are very similar to futsal courts.
Yeah, it's a great point, isn't it? That going back to what you mentioned about the street football from your youth days as well, that they've shared that as well.
Absolutely. I'll be honest with you, I don't think I got my first proper coaching session until I was 24 years of age. With Noel King and Shamrock Rovers. Anything I learned has been on the streets. So look, it's a fantastic environment for developing young players. And as I said, that's what we're trying to do with futsal, to bring back that spirit of street football, if you like.
Okay.
I suppose there's a book I came across there a number of years ago called The Talent Code by a guy called Daniel Coyle. Now, it examines how excellence is developed, and not just in football, in all walks of life. How does a piano player become the greatest piano player? How does a basketball player become the greatest basketball player? I suppose when he was looking at football, because Brazil are constantly producing world-class players, the country he homed in on was Brazil, and obviously he found that the big influence there was futsal. And I think this particular paragraph absolutely sums up what we've been speaking about for the last while in relation to futsal development, the all-round skills of players, the way it compresses the essential skills into a small box. Players touching the ball 600% more often than they would in the outdoor game. And I heard a great one there from a Brazilian coach mentioned about futsal. He described it as the laboratory of improvisation. It's a fantastic description of the game. Paul, you agree?
100%. As I said, I've seen it firsthand, most definitely at the highest level. I've seen it with the young kids, and we'll speak about the kind of winter futsal modules, even over a 6-week period of just playing, 6 regular games of futsal. And it's not just me, the coaches have come to me, and testimonies from them, which get into now in a minute. Yeah.
Very good. So you mentioned Spain as a trip. I suppose one of the common themes that we've already touched on so far, that you've mentioned, you guys so far, is you get to go on some nice trip, guys, don't you?
Yeah, it's not bad.
Paul, you looked at Spain as a case study. Can you explain kind of why you chose Spain and what they've been doing?
Yeah, so obviously myself and Derek were there numerous times over the years, and myself and Martin were there with the FEI Coach Education Department in 2019, and under, as I said, the supervision of a UEFA study visit, where this, it's knowledge sharing, a number of associations brought together with the host venue, obviously taking the lead, in this case, the Spanish FA. And they really gave us the history and origins of futsal within Spain, which I was particularly interested in. And a couple of the takeaways that I took was that, obviously it was back in '86, in around the mid '80s, certainly, that they went big style into futsal, but they were influenced by the South American population within their own country that brought this game across, obviously, the water, and wanted it developed, and it grew organically from there through the 70s, through the 80s, and then they obviously formalized it to a degree and put a lot of emphasis where, we'd see a lot of these outdoor courts when we go on our holidays to Spain, and with those futsal goalposts. So they really invested in facilities and drove the school's participation. But not only that, they drove the game with the 6 and 7-year-olds. So a lot of kids in Spain's first introduction to kind of football academies, would be futsal. And of course, there's an alternative. They can play their grass 77 format that they offer over there. But what they found in Spain was the kids actually a lot of them enjoyed futsal more so. And so up to this point, they have close to 100,000 registered players just playing futsal alone in Spain. That is their game of choice. Obviously, they've X amount playing football, but the sole purpose, numerous kids, as I said, playing just futsal. So that was quite interesting.
I suppose, Paul,
sure.
touching on that point as well, I mean, Spain back in the 70s and 80s would have had a kind of reputation for being a very, very physical team, and played at a frenetic pace. Obviously, with a bit of technique, but the pure physicality of the team would have been kind of quite noteworthy. And I suppose they wanted to kind of bring a bit more finesse to it, if you like, and put themselves in the frame for, challenging for world titles. So I suppose since they introduced futsal in '86, there's been a whole generation that have grown up with futsal, the likes of the Xavi, Iniesta, Torres. And it's amazing to see since 1986 up to now, 2020, the number of championships that they've actually won is just phenomenal. I'm not saying that futsal is the be all and end all, was the complete reason for that, but certainly it would have had an influence on the style of player that they were producing, on the style of play that they were actually playing. And as I said, the list of honours there is phenomenal. And that's on top of 7 European futsal championships that they would have won as well.
So it's an interesting point, Derek, because we can see the list of honours there that they've won in a relatively short period of time. It's a considerable amount across so many different age groups as well. But probably the biggest barometer of success has been altering that style of play, because they're now known around the world for playing slick football.
Absolutely. And if you look, say, for example, at the likes of Barcelona, for example, a lot of their kids would kind of have grown up playing futsal in school, but they also have a futsal department in Barcelona as well. And back in the day when Guardiola was manager there, he was known to actually link in and have quite a number of chats with the futsal manager. There was kind of elements of the game that they could actually pick up and bring into football game, the kind of blocking tactics, the rotational movements and all that, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's futsal has been a huge influence in Spain.
Just the next clip, Gareth, just want to, show the viewers is, just to kind of back up kind of the research, what we've seen, what we've been presented when we've traveled to Spain is Iniesta. I think we'd all regard as one of the best players in the world. A phenomenal talent. But when you hear top stars like him, like Xavi, Messi, Ronaldo, crediting futsal in their youth, to how they have developed their skills and honed them obviously for football, and in most of their cases, it just really means we should stand up and take a little bit more notice of this game and the benefits it has.
Empecé jugando a fútbol sala. Todo empezó aquí. Jugar ahora me lleva a mis raíces. A los pequeños espacios en los que has de encontrar una salida. Una diferente en cada ocasión. Ser predecible es perder. Hay que probar cosas nuevas, hay que arriesgar. Rápidamente te das cuenta que la posesión lo es todo. Y eso nunca cambia. Juegues donde juegues.
It all has to start somewhere, Paul, doesn't it? So grassroots is where it has to start at.
Yeah, so in fairness to the FEI, we, through the colleagues, through my development officer colleagues around the country, we tried to keep this game afloat as much as possible in the last 10 years or so, predominantly through our schools competitions. We have a kind of third, fourth class taster competition that we all run. We have a national first year competition in schools. But where the likes of myself and other colleagues such as Dennis Hines, Dan and Claire, and I could name check many others, but he's a particular driver of the game. We focused in on the younger kids, offering kind of futsal modules, either in conjunction with the local leagues or independent, predominantly in the winter time. So with this opportunity where the kids get away from those muddy pitches, they've guaranteed games, and that's where the coaches and managers are really receptive to this game, just having that continuity, which is really important. We've also, through our intercultural department, we've ran adults futsal leagues. I know Martin will speak about the AUL futsal league in a moment, but that's been a huge success in terms of bringing different backgrounds, nationalities, integration, and all that, and obviously under the current supervision of the AUL. We also have a prominent colleges futsal tournament. You see there, Rihanna Jarrett. So again, that was another competition that's really kind of given more focus at the higher level. And obviously there's a UEFA futsal place that we'll talk about in a moment, to the winners of these competitions as well. So, we're trying to grow, but certainly my focus on a lot of the development officer colleagues was really that young age, with that 6 to 12 is where we wanted to see the game grow.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to say, having visited the tournaments that Paul put on, particularly the NDSL tournament out in Gormanstown, where you'd have 600 children coming in over a weekend playing futsal, the excitement and the whole buzz around the place was just phenomenal. Credit to Paul and his colleagues out there for running those tournaments.
And this was the most recent one, Derek, was with got Stephen Kenny there in January of this year, just before the kind of lockdown. We got lucky, we got the six weeks done in Gormanston, and great support from Fingal County Council and Niall McGurk in particular, within that department. That local authority really bought into it, because a remit of a local authority is obviously participation across all sports. Obviously football being the number one most participated sport, they said, yeah, there's something in this, and they gave a huge backing, so much so we used Gormanston as the main central venue that could accommodate 72 teams, but we had satellite venues all across Fingal, so we were able to cater for 8s, 9s, 10s and 11s. You'd 1,200 players playing week in and week out. So yeah, Stephen Fairplay came along and launched it there in January this year, and really saw the benefits of it likewise. So in terms of futsal opportunities, we've touched on some of them already. Derek mentioned about the women's opportunities. You know, there's huge exposure there and potential to grow that game and to grow futsal for girls. So again, that's going to be a key focus hopefully going forward. I know Martin, you might want to come in terms of the education. You'll speak in a moment, but in terms of, you know, what opportunities we have.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned before, we have the AUL League. Okay, so that's the one that we currently have at senior level. Okay, but we also have the colleges league. And what I mentioned in the college league at senior level, because we have a cup, and the winner of that cup will play in Europe. So imagine for a club like Tolka Rovers, for mentioning something, or even DCU, if we want to call it college level, playing at UEFA level, at European competition, where they can show their brand outside of Ireland. I think that's a massive prize that we have in here for all the clubs who want to participate in futsal. At the moment, the AUL, it is covering Leinster, so we have 2 divisions there. We have around 9 to 10 teams in the first division, and then we have 8 teams in the second division, which is good. Every year is growing. Every year we have more participation, and I think that slowly, futsal start to grow here in Ireland. The good thing is that we, as Paul mentioned, we have more kids playing the game. Those kids are now starting to grow up. Those kids are now starting to see, okay, where can I play futsal at senior level? And that's when they engage us and they ask us, hey, can we start training with you? I had a great fun here and there. And that's when we start to get all those players. But again, at international level, if you want to play at international level, you win the FAI Futsal National Cup, and then you have your chance to play in Europe.
Yeah, I suppose just touching on that, Martin, it's the quickest route to European football for any club, and I mean any club who wants to set up a futsal team, and you know, if they can affiliate to their various leagues and enter into the FAI Futsal Cup, if they win that, they're straight into Futsal Champions League. It's a magnificent opportunity. I suppose you also mentioned, Martin, about the international teams. Obviously, in the past, we did have an international team. Unfortunately, we don't at the moment. I think we're only one of 2 or 3 countries in the UEFA futsal community that don't. But hopefully, in the near future, we can kind of get that sorted and put international futsal back on the map. But yeah, there's amazing opportunities for people out there who want to play futsal, but not only for players, also for coaches and for referees. Yeah. I mean, Rob Rogers, for example, who's refereeing in League of Ireland now, is probably one of the top referees in the league. Rob cut his teeth in European competition in futsal, in the UEFA Futsal Champions League back in the day. So, you know, I'm sure that was a great development opportunity for him at the time. So yeah, it's not only for players, but also for coaches and referees as well.
There's a great symmetry here that you can see at the last slide and this slide in particular, that where futsal can link in almost like a branch off all of the different elements of what is done, like the player development plan, the elite player pathway, the national leagues. Yeah, like even we saw the picture there of the women's deaf futsal team who done great work under Dave Bell there recently as well. It's a great symmetry that should all connect together.
It links everywhere. It links absolutely everywhere, from the very youngest grassroots players right up to senior international players, to women's players, to players playing football for all teams. It basically cuts across the entire spectrum of football within the FAI. So as you can see, that's why we're so kind of keen to promote the game.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to re-echo Derek's point, you know, futsal is a fantastic game in its own right, and you know, we're not going away from that. But really, we see the twin track approach, and that's an approach other associations have taken, notably the English FA in recent years. But what it's pertinent to me, especially, is the dropout rate in football. I don't think we look at this enough within the association and within the game, that we just allow it to happen. Well, I personally think futsal could be one element of a solution, that where the kids get to, whether it be that 14, 15, 16, that some of them drift as they tend to do, sadly, that why not keep the club jersey on and let's offer under 14s, under 15, under 16, under 18 futsal. So half the cohort that still want to play their football or futsal can still represent their local community club or the likes. So again, I really think there's potential there, and it'd be unique across a lot of sports that are struggling with this point.
I think that's a great point, Paul. That could be a gateway back into football for people who simply just want to enjoy the game. They may not want to go back playing elite level football, or playing for a team. They may just want to play with friends on a just to play the game again.
Yeah. Again, we see the popularity of the Astro Leagues. And the beauty of that is it's just less numbers. Nowadays it's getting hard to get that commitment from individuals. So, this could certainly be the kind of future proofing of the game, and the registered players and the likes. Keeping them within the association, and as I said, linking them back in when the time is right, back into the senior game, or keep them within grassroots, whatever it may be. So, that's critical. Not dismissing the Messi quote there as well. There's so much to this game. Hopefully you can see from our passion. We really want to see this grow now in the next couple of years, please God.
Yeah.
And just to re-echo what other associations are doing, obviously the English FA, through the Premier League, their PPP plan in terms of player development, they've embedded it across their winter module. The Premier League clubs have all bought into it. Again, clear focus on the younger ages. They have a clear strategy now across the board. It's embedded in all areas of the association. So Pete Sturgis there has done Trojan work as well, and Mike Scubala, their international coach. So, the game over there is going from strength to strength. Similarly, again, only very recently, this is a serious development in Italy. Italy have obviously been renowned in futsal as well over the previous years. We focused a lot on Spain. But for a former futsal international coach to head up the youth section of Juventus, again shows how this game is continuing to grow across Europe.
Yeah, here we're talking. This is the national head coach of futsal in Italy. So he's the head coach of the national team, and he was hired by Juventus to develop all the youngsters from that team to provide them another tool to play the game.
Right, like having that endorsement from someone like that is critical, isn't it? Like a couple of slides earlier, we had an endorsement from Stephen Kenny, who's now, our men's senior team manager. So to have an endorsement from people like that is going to get more people interested.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we see here in France's futsal development and football development now, they're more or less making it mandatory for young players to play futsal up to a certain age, which follows the Brazilian model, I suppose, if you like, as well. But it's a massive influence, and I suppose our message is that futsal is a complementary player development tool to produce footballers. We don't just start out with a view to producing kind of just futsal players. It's to produce better footballers, but we are also looking to create another pathway for those players who might, for some reason, drop out of football or might see another opportunity for themselves in futsal to go to a high level if they can't make it as a football player.
So can you also
Martin, we're into your area now, the coach education side of futsal.
Yeah, we mentioned a lot tools, and that's how we need to see it. We need to see futsal as another backpack full of tools that you can use when you're playing the game. Futsal is just that. I mean, just another tool that we can provide our football players to be better at the game that they're playing at. Okay, so in order to do that, we need to have coaches who are educated, who know about the game, and who are passionate about the game. Okay, so we all have seen the coach education pathway. We have seen that many times, and I'm going to focus on the left-hand side there, where we have the pyramid about futsal. At the moment, we have futsal intro, futsal D, futsal C, and futsal B. Okay, we are not delivering at the moment futsal C and futsal B. It was our goal before the pandemic. Now we need to delay all that a bit back, but we are hoping to get the B license, the UEFA B license at some stage in 2021. Okay, at some stage. So what do we talk in the futsal intro? This is just a intro course. Okay, so what can you expect in here? Just more information about what futsal is about. Okay, this is where we bring futsal to all those coaches who never heard about futsal but want to learn about the game, who has some sort of interest. Is this something that I can bring to my club? Is this something that I can bring to my players? So it's a very basic level of, futsal. Once we move to the D license, now is when we start to talk a bit more about futsal. But we're only going to be touching the individual skills and the individual tactic of the player. We are not going to be focused on anything else, okay? Then when we move to the C license, we're going to start to talk about group tactics. And when I mention group tactics, I mention 2 or 3 players, combinations player, 2 or 3 players, no more than that, okay? And this is in alignment with how kids need to be developed. A lot of 2v2s, a lot of 3v3s, and then we move to 4v4s, and then we move to the full game. And then B license is just a whole knowledge, a lot of tactical information, and now we are starting to play as a team, okay? But we are following a path. So far, since 2017, we have delivered 25 futsal intro courses, 447 coaches were certified. It's good to see that number is growing and growing and growing. Then we have 3 courses since 2018, okay? 47 participants, okay? And as I mentioned before, we were thinking about delivering during the summer 2020 the futsal C license, but because of the pandemic, we need to delay that, and we are targeting the B license for 2021. Okay. So far, do you have any questions, Gareth?
Yeah, so I suppose when we look at it on the coaching pathway there, I just kind of struck me that going back to what I was saying earlier about connecting into different strands of football, coaches might want to go one way. They might want to be a youth coach. They might want to go to pro license level. But what was interesting on the pathway there was that it's just to the side in a similar way that the goalkeeping was on the other side as well. So that while they do connect, it is very much its own specialized form of coaching as well.
Exactly. That is correct. And that's another option that the coach will have. Do I go this path? Do I go through football? Do I go through goalkeeping coach, or do I go through futsal? Maybe I feel more confident going through futsal, and maybe I have more opportunities going through futsal. So this is the path that I want to take.
I suppose, Paul, on this one in terms of coaching futsal, it's something that maybe we could look at further down the line in terms of getting teachers and coaches in schools involved in very much at a developmental stage of because they will have indoor halls largely as well, schools.
Yeah, that's going to be the critical area going forward, using the teacher CPD hours, in terms of, training them up just on the basics, as the rules, the format, the benefits. The schools are all set up. They have the basketball courts. If we could convince government to put the basketball hoop on a futsal court net underneath, that would be the ideal and something we got to aim for. You've got the lines, you've got as I said, the hard surface, so yeah, we need to support that. We need to, eradicate those yellow fluffy footballs, which we have done over the previous years, but they're still out there, sadly. So yeah, no, we're getting there.
And Paul is mentioning a good point there. We have the facilities already. We need to start to use them. Okay. When I grew up, we didn't have spaces to have 11-a-side pitches because of the density of the population in Montevideo. So all the schools are instead of having an 11 pitch, they all have small-sided pitches, futsal pitches, where we can learn the game. So this is something that we can take advantage here in Ireland because we already have the facilities. We just need to find a way to incorporate that in the school programs.
I think as well, Gareth, while it's fantastic that we now have a coach education pathway for futsal, I think for the coaches out there who are coaching the very youngest kids, not to get too caught up in futsal tactics or anything like that. We just want them to get the kids playing the game and let them play and let them develop their skills, naturally, and not to get caught up in tactics. That will come if you're really interested in the game of futsal and you want to take that as a pathway. As I said, there's a fantastic pathway there now that Martin's describing. But initially, let the kids play.
Brilliant.
So I mentioned individual tactics before. This is part of the D license, as highlighted there on the right-hand side corner. So what is individual tactic? We have the definition there from UEFA. I'm not going to be touching in depth this information here, but we are going to be talking about the positions, how the players need to be on the pitch, how to defend 1v1 situation. Once they learn all that stuff, then we can move to the how, the when, and the who should be doing that. Okay, but basically we're going to be talking about the individual. Basically about the individual, okay, because I think it is important to understand how the individual affect the game. So we start really slow with the individual, then we move on. Well, if you come up to the next one, then we move to the group tactics. And when we talk about group tactics, it is important to understand that this is a combination between 2 or 3 players. 2 or 3 players playing within the game. Okay, so we are not talking about the individual. Now we're talking about 2 players who are connecting each other to try to take advantage of a situation in the game. Okay, and I'm going to be showing here something that we call a diagonal. Okay, so basically you have there the definition, but I'm not going to be touching that. But basically is when a player passes the ball to one side and make a diagonal right to the opposite side to receive the ball and penetrate the defense. So we are going to be seeing a video now. Okay, so have a look at this player. He's going to pass the ball to the right, and he's going to make a diagonal run to the left to receive the ball there behind the space. Okay, so that's a diagonal. Okay,
yeah.
On top of that, we have. Sorry, do you want to ask a question?
No.
Okay, good.
Keep going.
Okay, so on top of that, we have parallels, we have blocks, direct and indirect, we have overlaps, we have reverse overlap, we have pass pivot, we have offensive triangles. All that is covered in the combination of 2 or 3 players. So we need to understand, first we need to coach the individual. Once the individual knows how he is involved in the game, now we need to start to talk about 2 or 3 players. They need to learn all this stuff. Once they learn all this stuff, then we can move to the next slide, Paul. So now we can move on to team tactics. Okay, and when we talk about team tactics, we need to understand the tactical structure. Okay, and you can see that we have the aims of the attack, we have the aims of the defense, and we have a transition, offensive or defensive. Each one of the transitions, we have phases in each one of them. Okay, I'm not going to be covering too much in this because it's going to be boring for many people, but this is part of the B license. Once as a coaches we understand that, we can start to talk to our players about team tactics. Okay, so if you move on to the next slide, Paul. Now we have the phases of play. Okay, each one of these phases. Okay, so for the attack we have 3 phases. Okay, offensive transition, positional attack, and set pieces. And each one of and those 3, they have 8 sub-phases. And the same happened with defense. We have 3 phases and 8 sub-phases in each one of the tactics that we need to understand, and players need to know about all of them, because otherwise you won't be able to talk about team tactics. Okay, you need to understand each one of them, and you need to coach your players in each one of those phases and sub-phases.
It's similar to any coaching level. The further you go up the pyramids there, it gets more tactical, more intricate.
Exactly, but we start from the very basics. Yes. We start with 1 player, we move on to 2, 3 players. Now we start to talk about team tactics. Okay, so if you move on to the next slide, Paul. Once we know all that, we need to also know that we have attacking zones and defending zones. So I'm going to start with the one on the top, left top, where we have the 3 attacking zones. We have the opening up play zone, we have the build up play zone, and we have the finishing zone. Those are 3 zones that the players need to understand. Okay, the players need to know what is going to happen in each one of those phases. If you're playing with a 3-1 formation, okay, then you need to understand that main player, the pivot, needs to be playing always in the finishing zone. And that player needs to understand where is the finishing zone, because that's the area where that player is going to be playing.
Yeah.
Okay, then when we're talking about channels, we have 3 channels. left channel, right channel, and center channel. Okay, so when we're talking about, again, the 3-1 formation, the wingers, when we're talking about the wingers, they need to know that those channels are the area where they should be playing. Okay?
Yeah.
And when we defend, then we also have zones, and we have 4 zones. Okay? So if you're attacking from left to right, okay, and you want to start defending in zone 3, in zone 3, players need to know that they're going to be defending in 32 by 20 meters, meaning that when the opponent goalkeeper has the ball and they're going to start the game, that's the height, the defensive height that we need to have. Zone 3. Don't go to zone 4. Start from zone 3. Don't drop down. Don't start from zone 2. Start from zone 3. So those are the zones, and those are the channels that we have in futsal. Move on to the next slide, Paul, please. Okay, so model of play. We're going to be touching this. How do we want to defend? First of all, we need to pick the type of defense. Zonal, individual with changes or mixes. Once we have defined that, what's going to be our behavior on the pitch? Are we going to be a holding defense, regardless of the type of defense? Are we going to be a holding defense, or are we going to be a pressing defense? So those are the things that players need to know. Okay, and then what we mentioned before, defensive height. Where are we going to start defending? In which zone we are going to start defending? Okay, and then the starting position, the figure that our team is going to have when we start to defend in each one of the zones. Now, the starting position will depend on how the other team is attacking. And again, I'm not going to be covering this because all this information is coming when you do the B license. Okay, Paul, if you move on to the next slide. So once you know the model of play, then you need to start to develop 3 concepts. You need to develop the principles. So this is how the general idea, how you want your team to play. Then you're going to start to think about the how-tos. What are the tools that I'm going to be giving to my players to make sure that they follow those principles? And in here, we'll start to count all the individual tactics that we touch in the D license and all the group tactics that we touch in the C license. Okay, and then the guidelines. These are the exceptions. Okay, because if we are talking about how we are going to defend, if we're going to have 4 players behind the imaginary line of the ball, if the ball goes to the wing and my wing from that side is the one pressing the ball, what happens if that wing is being blocked? Those are the exceptions. Okay, normally if you are man marking, you are going to follow, but if that player is being blocked, what is the exception? And players need to know what are the guidelines for those exceptions. Why? Because we want to be efficient. We want to eliminate doubts to obtain optimal performance. Okay.
A lot of these, even when you look at the how-to there, Martin, a lot of these are very transitional, or transferable to the 11-a-side game. When you look at defensive triangles, rotations, and stuff.
Absolutely correct, and that's what I'm saying. That's what we're having saying. This is another tool that we can provide to our football players. Okay, and again, as I mentioned to you, one thing is training in a small-sided game, a 5v5 game, training where there's no pressure other than having a good intensity in that game, and competing in a small-sided game. Because if you lose the ball, if you don't pass the ball properly, every time that you make a mistake, your team is being punished. And that's what futsal brings to our players. Confident, wanting to have the ball because they know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I think also the very high levels of concentration as well, Martin, exactly, are very important. I found when I was coaching with the national team, the striking difference between coaching futsal and coaching in football was the sheer intensity of the game. The game can absolutely change in a few seconds. You could be winning, and literally 30 seconds later, you could actually be down. You have to think on your feet. You're continually adjusting your tactics, making those substitutions, kind of assessing the energy levels of the players, and it's very mentally challenging. You can come off after a game totally exhausted, compared to maybe as a football coach. From doing both, certainly futsal is mentally more challenging because everything is happening so quickly. Martin, you'd probably be aware of that as well, having coached.
Well, as a futsal coach, you are more involved. Your decisions have a huge impact. You can make a tactical change straight away. You put 4 players out, you put 4 new players out, you can have a completely different structure or way of playing, a completely different way of defending. So as a coach, your involvement in the game is massive, and your decisions really affect the game.
Yeah, I mean, with an 11-a-side team, you do your team talk, you send your teams out, you have very limited contact with the players after that. But in futsal, you're literally the conductor of the match, and it really is mentally challenging. But it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
But that high intensity as well, and the very fluid nature of it, that turns it into a very exciting spectator sport as well.
Amazing. I ran a few kind of education trips when I was a national coordinator, and brought some kind of people from various schoolboy leagues and junior leagues away to see various futsal events, and they were just completely blown away by it, blown away by the atmosphere, that there could be between 5,000 and 10,000 players in an indoor hall, the noise, the spectacle, the music around it. Just as a spectacle, it's amazing. It's amazing. People are blown away by it.
Yeah, and just on that, Gareth, I know it might sound optimistic, but we believe in the potential. We honestly believe this could be the #1 indoor sport, team sport in Ireland. We think that is the potential of this game, and that's where we want to drive it towards.
You can see that, Paul, though. I was just thinking when I was looking at Martin's presentation there, that it shares a lot of tactical similarities with basketball, for example, and the fluidity of it, the zones, and people might watch a basketball game and just kind of get caught up in the excitement as we've just spoken about, but it's a very tactical and technical game as well.
It's a very, very good observation, because the rules, evolved from handball and futsal back in. Martin, you might want to speak.
Well, it evolved from water polo. So it is a combination of many sports, and basketball, it has a huge influence. So when we're talking about blocks are coming from basketball.
Yeah.
And the way that we block is the same way that we block in basketball. So it is a combination of many: handball, water polo, basketball, so many different sports. But again, from the tactical aspect, it's really tactical. It's like playing chess. I need to wait to see what move are you going to be doing so I can make my move. And you can make those changes straight away.
And Derek, those the transferable attributes I mentioned there as well, it kind of got me thinking that, like, when you're coaching kids, and you're trying to coach them, like, say, a wall pass or something like that, and they might kind of think, like, I can't really picture how this is going to work on a full-size 11-side pitch. But if you do it on a futsal pitch, you can actually see it's in a much more tighter environment. And once you can master that skill, then you can bring it into the 11-side game.
Yeah, well, I mean, the situations just appear in a futsal court. Suddenly you're faced with a 1v1 or a 2v1 or what have you. So those situations are appearing far more often to a kid. So they have to work their way out of those situations. That's why it's great for stimulating creativity as well. The kid has to decide: do I play a wall pass? Do I dribble out of this situation? And instead, if that's happening 6 times more often in a game of futsal, then they would have that opportunity at the futsal pitch. The kids are obviously going to get better quicker.
Yeah, and we're touching a good point here, because transitions in football, you're taking a shot, goalkeeper got the ball or went out. Most of the strikers are going to be doing like that. If you do like that in futsal, then you receive a goal. Why? Because you didn't make a transition to defend, and you didn't put yourself behind the line of the ball. So there's no time to do like that when you miss a shot. You need to straight away. And if from young ages you can coach those players to make sure that when the ball is gone, now you need to transition to defend straight away, then the better.
And transitions can happen every 5 seconds in futsal. It's amazing. You just have to be switched on all the time. And I said that's why it's great for developing the all-round player, both from an attacking point of view and a defensive point of view.
And Paul, I was going to say, from a grassroots point of view, from a parent's point of view, if you send your kid down to play football sometimes, do you come back and did you enjoy that? Well, I hardly touched the ball because I was playing left back and everything was over the right side of the pitch, or it was up front and we never got the ball up as far as me or whatever. But this, like, there's fewer players, it's a smaller court. You're going to, as Derek's touched on, you touch the ball a lot more in this game.
Well, certainly, I think we could probably, the 4 of us could relate to, if you're that big strapping young kid, you you often didn't get to cross the halfway line, when we were growing up. But, the fluidity in futsal, you find yourself in, automatically in attacking positions or areas of the court. So, they're coming home with smiles on their faces. And if someone says, what's the best thing about futsal? It's fun. And I don't think you can summarize it any better than that.
Yeah, and we don't have to forget that when you start to play the game, you play because you want to be in touch with the ball. So if you want to play football, the first thing that you give to your kid is a ball. You're not going to ask him, okay, you need to run 50 meters from here to there 20 times to become a left back. And then after that, I give you a ball. You know what I mean? So you want to be in touch. And futsal gives you that, the chance to be in contact with the ball all the time.
Yeah.
So what's next now in the terms of development for futsal in Ireland?
Well, I'll answer that, Gareth. There's been encouraging signs within, the FAI with the current change in structures and kind of leadership and whatnot. I certainly, the current interim CEO, we presented to him, and he has taken this game massively, in the presentation that we put to him, and his knowledge of futsal now is greatly enhanced. So the hope is, that it runs, it's embedded, as Derek said previously, that it's across all strands of development, from most definitely prominently so through grassroots into League of Ireland, into high performance, through to international. So that's what we want to see.
And so I suppose like the reason why we're talking about this and this platform as well, we're coach education to be integral and, right in the middle of this as well, that, as it was mentioned, we're talking a lot about the players, but coaching the coaches and the coaches getting into master this as well.
Yeah, it is very important to have knowledgeable coaches who can teach our kids how to play the game and how to enjoy the game. It's not just about just going to a sport hall, giving them a ball and make them play. We need to make sure that they understand how the game is played.
Because Derek, like as you use the word conductor there, as if that for a coach that sounds really exciting to be able to have such an influence on the game as a coach.
Yeah, it's as you go up the levels, Gareth, you'll have much more influence on the game. If you're playing at, you're a national team or a Champions League side, that's when you really have to have your finger on the pulse. But, if we're looking at say grassroots coaches, for example, and we're trying to get grassroots coaches to promote the games in their clubs, in their league, to use it when coaching the kids, they don't have to have all that knowledge. You just have to let the kids play. That's what we want first and foremost. First and foremost, we want to use futsal as that complementary player development tool. And if at a certain age, people love futsal so much that they want to become only futsal players or only futsal coaches, there's a magnificent pathway there now, as Martin has alluded to, in terms of being a coach and in terms of being a player, those opportunities, if you want to go that way. But initially, if we can produce better footballers through the use of futsal, the game could look very bright for us in the future.
Guys, thanks very much for all of that insight. It's really fascinating, really a lot of work that's been done clearly, and that's clearly going on as well. And you can clearly see that there's a blueprint there as well that can be easily followed. Obviously, success in other countries, case studies that you pointed out, and the history of the game. But really exciting from a coach's perspective, really exciting from a player development perspective, but also just for Irish football in general, I think, as well. So thanks very much, Derek. Thanks very much, Paul, and thanks very much, Martin. And
thank you very much.
And thank you for watching this. This is a coach education webinar on futsal. Let us know your comments and feedback on social media, and make sure to subscribe to us on FAI TV on YouTube. Thanks very much.